So welcome everybody again. This is episode 0004, I guess, depending on which one I get edited and put out first. And I'm here with Luis Fernandez, talking about military transition from military to civilian life. Luis is author of 2 books, Keep on Leading and Conus Battle Drills. I've only personally read the first introductions to both books. Unfortunately, they weren't on Audible, and maybe we can fix that here in the near future. Who knows? But that's usually how I take in my books. Lewis has been in the Army from 2004 to 2012. He got out as a captain, and he was a infantry ranger. Spent 2 tours, one in Iraq, one in Afghanistan, so 24 months total. Came home with a Bronze Star. He's originally from Florida and currently lives in Arizona with his wife and his children. And with that, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on here today.
Thanks, man. You're not the first person that's mentioned the Audible thing to me. You know, I've tried recording it, and then I have you seen those memes where you're like, you hear your voice and you're like, oh, you know, so I do it. I'm like, man, it's much better when I don't say it. So, you know, I don't know. Maybe if we know somebody that wants to do that and record it on my behalf, I'd be happy to do that. But I don't know. There's also a time aspect to it.
Yeah, it takes a while. It's not easy. If I could find a quiet booth to do it in, I would probably sit down and do it. There's a couple other books that I'd like to do that with as well. So you're currently independent business consultant, and that's really mainly the precipice for this whole entire conversation. Talking about military retirement, military people getting out. And I think the most important part that people don't really address in between all those topics is the difficulties and the nuances of transition from military to civilian life, whether it be your personal life stuff or your business life stuff. So that's what we want to try to get in today. And I'll just kind of go through that. So how did you first get in the military? And can you give me any details about the physical place, the time frame, and also the thoughts that were going on in your head when you decided to get into the military? Any self-talk that you might have had before you joined the service?
Yeah, I was in a French class at the University of Florida, and it was September 11th, 2001. And a girl walked into the class crying to let us know that a plane had hit the Twin Towers, and one of them, and it looked like it was on purpose. And so spent the day watching this event unfold and convincing myself that I wanted to join the military and, do my part. So it was within a few weeks of that event. I was going to drop out of college, and everyone in my family tried to talk me out of it. And then eventually my grandfather called. So both my parents were born in Cuba. So they're immigrants to the US, and my grandfather called, and he started to tell me the story of what it was like when he came to the US. And it's a story that I have heard so many times before, but when grandpa wants to tell his story, you let abuelito, he gets to talk, right? And so it's a very Patha Familias Latin culture thing. And so he finishes his story about coming to the US with 4 kids and working 3 jobs and pumping gas and delivering newspapers and working at a bakery and being a mechanic and fixing his own stuff and putting, doing whatever he could to put my grandmother through college and make sure that his kids had opportunity. And he says to me, I told you that story. I said, no, well, why'd you tell me this story? He goes, he said it in Spanish, and he says, because you owe me. Because I didn't know you, but I did it for you. So now you owe me and my sacrifice to finish your college, and then you can go join the Army. And so that was the reason I didn't drop out and enlist. And instead I walked into the ROTC building and signed up to, join as soon as I graduated.
Wow. That's an amazing story. That's one of those life-changing moments, I guess. That's. I think that was a big reason that a bunch of people joined the military was that event. It's Thank you for sharing that with me.
Wow, I appreciate the opportunity to share it.
So what were your expectations as far as military life? What did you have in mind when so you went through ROTC, so you got a really good taste of the military before actually getting like fully engaged in the military. But did you have any expectations coming in that maybe?
Yeah, a little bit. So one of the things about the way that I did ROTC, this was 2002 to 2004. And the war was really raging. And we knew, being in ROTC, and knowing that, my top preferred branches were going to be combat arms, that we were going to war. It was not, there was a question in 2003 where my junior year, I was like, oh no, we're going to miss it. But obviously not. But we knew that was going to happen, right? So everything I did, college really became kind of secondary to me from the military thing. It was, for me, my degree became a path to becoming an infantry officer. And that was what I wanted to do. And we actually trained really hard. There was a group of us that we focused on tactics, learning everything we could about combat and warfare. And, I graduated college. I could, call for fire, call 9 lines, understood the weapon systems that we had and what were their, the capabilities of different aircraft that would support an infantryman, and all of the different artilleries and mortars, and, do combined arms fighting, and how do I maneuver with tanks on the battlefield, and all of this stuff, right? So that was really my college education. The degree that I got was secondary to me. Then, I studied just enough. I graduated with 3.0 GPA, like literally 3.07, like just barely squeaked that 3. And every minute that I wasn't really studying for school, I was studying for war and preparing for that. It still was not what I expected, right? It's hard to it's so surreal that you're when you're in real combat and you're experiencing this level of violence that we shouldn't need to experience as human beings, right? Like, your brain almost doesn't even know how to process it. And so to me, it felt like this surreal event that was truly separated from reality. And I don't know. I don't know how else to describe kind of like this mental state that you're in. And it was, I was, pursuing the task that I needed to do, and, following the, call for fire, move troops, and do all of the things that I knew that I was trained to do. But experientially, it felt, it certainly felt like outside of everything else we experience every day. It was this dreamlike experience. And maybe that was just my brain's way of handling this kind of, traumatic event, was to say, hey, this is kind of like hazy. This isn't super real, type thing. So I don't know that I expected that or counted on something like that happening. Although I understood how to fight. I didn't understand how my body was going to react to fighting.
How to actually process what was actually going on around you. Yeah. It's I've read many military books and know a bunch of people who've been in the combat situation. I mean, I deployed a couple times, but never had to get in a combat fight with anybody. But I've studied plenty about it, about taking in that surreal surrounding, and that's really what it is. It's what a lot of people say about it as well. Unfortunately, I don't know from firsthand experience, but yeah, it's devastating in a lot of ways, and I'm glad that people recognize that the PTSD and Like the doctors are really actively, aggressively trying to figure out ways to solve some of those psychological issues that people are dealing with. So yeah. Hmm. At what point did you? Yeah, it's tough, and it's like, we're starting off on a Daisy Downer or something. It's not really. I mean, that's what the military is. You deal with
Yeah.
stuff. But, um, so it's very real, and I appreciate your honesty and openness about it.
Sure.
Um, so, at what point did you decide to get out? What was the mental switch? Like, what was the self talk that
Sure.
said, "Hey, it's time to go, and I need to get out of the military"?
Well, the glamour of warfare kind of fades after you've been through it a few times. You know, uh, I was reading Band of Brothers, or and there was a moment in there where I felt like a real connection to whoever the person that said it. And it says something like, um, in your first firefight, you take a lot more risks and you do a lot more things that later on you certainly wouldn't do, right? And I remember reading that and saying, like, wow, that's also very true, right? The very first time is, it's adrenaline, it's exciting, and I don't know, there's this kind of, strangely, there's a little bit of excitement into it because this is what I've been training for years, and now it's kind of like a firefighter getting his first, rolling up on their first fire, right? This is your opportunity to do what you've been training for. But after a couple, then it's I kind of, like, I'm not doing that, right? Like, your 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 risk acceptance level, it starts to go down a little bit, and it's I'm gonna hold on this, this portion, like that's a really big tree, that's the one I'm gonna get behind, or that rock will be good cover, and you take less there's less hesitation, when yeah, but uh, anyways, so the glamour had worn off a little bit, and I eventually had a kid, and so I was married. My son was a few months old, um, and I was going through some interviews for some other cool guy work, and I noticed that most of the people that were interviewing me had pictures of kids and no spouses, and I asked, finally, one of them had a picture of him and his wife. I said, "Hey, what is the divorce rate in this program?" And he like paused and stumbled, and I could see like he didn't want to say, and he's like, "It's pretty high, man." I said, "Okay." Um, you know, my son didn't ask to come into this world, and like, it's unfair to him if if I pursue something that's going to make his life more difficult, or even I was already tagged at that point that I was going to be going back to Iraq. I was going to go back to the 82nd Airborne, and my priorities in life had changed, right? Like, I'd given up 2 years of combat time, and I felt like, okay, I did my part, and uh, I didn't feel like I had to do more, right? Certainly, since then, there have been moments when it's like, man, I wish I'd have got that Green Beret, and I wish I'd have, you know, pursued that special project, and like done this really cool guy work that probably would have been neat. But I got three little babies and a very strong marriage, and we still like each other. So, you know, I think it was a good choice.
Right, made the logical decision. Yeah, I really, and I apologize if some of these questions like double over what's in your book, because a lot of this stuff is in your. After reading your book, I wrote the questions, and then after reading, the first chapter or so, realize that they overlap a lot. But I think it's important for people who may not have exposure to your books, who may not have exposure to you, to actually hear this part of the story. So, um, okay, so the first year of your transition after leaving the military, what did that look like? I mean, how was that for you?
Dude, it was so hard. Um, I had no idea how hard it was going to be. And, you know, I guess that was 10 years ago now, but, your expectations of what you're getting yourself into is like, oh, you know, everyone wants to hire a veteran and I'm going to make all this money and, you know, and I'm not going to have to get up for PT and no one's going to be up my ass about whether or not I shaved and I can wear whatever I want and I'm going to have all this freedom. Right. What you don't count for is that every moment of my life is around the military. My friends, my social circle, my work, and oftentimes my sense of self-worth is tied to the military as well. You know, do I have the right badges and did I get the right medals? And, you know, is my PT score high enough and my body fat low enough? And all of these things that, so your psyche, how you look at yourself, how you think of yourself, the people that you talk to, the people you hang out with, the people that give you positive feedback, your friends, your work, all of that is changing. This isn't like someone deciding to leave Google and going to work for Microsoft, right? This is a lot like immigrating to another country. Right? Like you are leaving everything that you know. And now you are entering this other world that frankly doesn't give a shit about you. And the one you just left kind of doesn't give a shit about you either. Right. So now you're, so, it was hard. And I talk a little bit about this in Conus battle drills that of finding that sense of purpose, in what I did and redefining how I looked at myself and what I valued out of myself. And what I valued out of life and where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. All of that. It was just like, and there's probably still some discovery going on now, 10 years later. But it took some time to, you know, reset from the military life to now being a civilian. And, you know, something about accountability when people are holding you accountable, as they do in the military, that it's sort of in a weird, sadistic way. It's another way of them showing that they care about you in some sense, right? Like there's got to be some care in how you're doing when you're out. Like nobody gives a shit, right?
Nobody's calling to check on you, find out why you're late for formation, et cetera.
Nope. Yeah.
So in that transition, that first year, did you already have a plan in place of like, I have a job lined up or I've got a few job contacts in the house?
I did have a job. I did get a job. I actually double dipped for a while. So I started work at John Deere before I was still technically an officer. So it was like 2 months I had overlap. So I did get the job situation figured out. I made some dumb financial choices because I was moving to Iowa and I thought, oh, I'm going to need a truck. So I bought this new truck and I had this payment on this truck, which was dumb. And had like no idea. Don't take on a new expense right as you're getting out of the military because you don't know. You've never had this expenses that you're going to have now. Like you have no idea what your monthly bills are going to be. You have no clue. And I can't tell you because depending on what job you get, they could be different because you could get an employer that's going to pay all your insurance or maybe one that doesn't pay any, or maybe the one that pays, you know, somewhere in the middle. And, you know, there's all of these, you know, new taxes that you're now paying that you weren't paying before. There's no brakes on those anymore. Right. So, and also clothing, right? Like,
and you have to choose that clothing.
You gotta pick it out, you know?
Color match the belt and the shoes. Yeah.
Right. And what does your job require? Like, do you have to be business casual or not, or, you know, whatever. So, there's a lot. So don't take on like, you know, I wouldn't recommend buying a house in your first, you know, unless you know that you're never going to leave that location. But, you know, I wouldn't buy a house. Except at John Deere, when they moved you, they bought your house for you. So if you couldn't sell it. So that one made sense. So I guess there's always exceptions and stuff. But the point of this is to say, to limit the financial strain that you're going to put on yourself and your family as you get out. There's a whole new world of tugs on that. And you got to learn to live in new means.
Yep.
So,
yeah, it's actually one of my favorite questions for retirees is like, if and when you did you buy yourself a retirement gift, and what was it, right? And surprisingly, a few people that I've interviewed so far are like, yeah, no, I didn't buy any retirement gift. And they're actually ones that they're doing pretty well. I mean, after retirement. And it's usually, it seems to be, it's not like the causation between the two things, but
sure.
Yeah. I say the same
indicator.
Thing. Yeah. Like, yeah, you bought a 3,000 square foot house for your retirement gift, but now you've got $2,500 in mortgage bills and utilities and all kinds of crap that you got to pay for. And your retirement check's only half of what you made from the military.
Exactly.
Minus per diem, minus COLA, minus.
Yep.
Okay. So from the point where you left the military to the point you're at now, was there any kind of noticeable progression or sequence that led you there to where you're at right now? And if so, could you describe that sequence?
I don't know that there was any like specific, I don't know that it's anything anybody else could follow or should follow necessarily. I have been willing to try new things and take new risks and open up possibilities. And like we talked about, redefining what I value, what I have learned about myself. And so, in the beginning, I thought I wanted stability. So I looked for a large organization similar to the military that had a similar hierarchical structure and a lot of veterans inside of it. And, moving from the Army to John Deere, at least work-wise, wasn't a big shift in the culture of the area, right? I fit in pretty well there. And then I moved around inside of Deere pretty quickly. And then, eventually my wife wanted to come home to Arizona where she's from. And so went to Caterpillar and then kind of realized like, I want to try new things. I want to work on difficult problems that are hard to solve, because whenever I got a difficult problem, that was what I found to be the most fun. And those are the stories that end up in the book. The couple stories, and those are in Keep On Leading, which is a more recent book than Conus Battle Drills. It's about, the stories that make it in there are the ones that were these really hard problems, and everyone was basically saying there's no way to solve them and finding a way to solve it. Right. So, and that's what led me into this independent consulting thing that I've been doing now for a couple of years. Speaking of, by the way, Conus Battle Drills, for me, one, it was a little bit like therapy, being able to split everything out. But at the same time, I will say it's not written for everyone. I've gotten it's been pretty mixed feedback. It's got pretty good ratings on Amazon, but it is certainly a love it or hate it type book. It is written for an infantry or some combat arms. I have gotten some pretty rough feedback on the book of folks that like. Also, the world was different when I wrote it in 2015 than it is today. So culturally, some things have changed, and there's been a couple that I almost like pulled it off print just because it was, people hated it so much. Like, man, okay, maybe this doesn't need to be out there anymore. So it's not for everyone. Keep On Leading is much more on the corporate, it's designed for like a group deal. But the point of Conus Battle Drills and what it did for me was it was an opportunity to get everything off my chest. And that writing had a utility to it in helping me, get through whatever the things I was getting through. And I've gone back and read it a couple times or once, a couple years ago. And I was like, man, that dude was angry. Like I was an angry boy when I wrote that book in 2015. But yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, you had a lot of stuff going on in your life, and you saw firsthand the transition, and also on top of that, maybe getting some of that stuff out of your system that happened while you were in uniform, while you were in combat situations. So yeah, I mean, that's really the only reason to write a book, is if you have it so ingrained in your head and it keeps you up at night. Like that's an indicator, like, hey, maybe you should write this down, at least if not a
Yeah.
book, blog post, write something, write yourself a notebook, do
Right.
something, like get it
It's
out of
almost
your
like
mind.
your brain gives you permission when you do that to forget
Yeah,
it and let it go.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. It wants to hold on to it as long as you haven't written it down.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in that process right now of writing stuff, and it's actually surprising because I engage with it every day, so it doesn't feel like a chore, and I think that makes it all the more okay for me to do it, and hopefully
Yeah.
it turns into something. We'll see what happens. Okay, cool. So, if and when, what was one of the biggest failure moments you've experienced after leaving the military, and how did you process the stumbling point? Maybe some context of the time and place.
It's hard for me to, just the way that I approach things. It's hard for me to focus or to remember a failure. I don't generally frame things in success or failure. Uh, I know it sounds like really, what is the word I'm looking for? Cheesy. It sounds real cheesy. We're like, "Ooh, I don't see failure," right? Like there are times that I have failed a class in college. That was a failure. And I didn't make it through selection. That was a failure. Um, in my defense, I got injured, but whatever. I mean, I still didn't make it, right? But beyond that, it was learning opportunities and things that um, I can't say any one specific thing like uh, I failed at this, because I pulled out a lesson, I integrated that, and then I changed my behavior moving forward. And it's hard to say that was a failure based on that, right? Like, so um, I spent 2 years as a supervisor at John Deere, and then I was like, oh, I want to try marketing. And then I did marketing for 2 years, and I was like, I'd rather bring new products to market. So I did program management for 2 years, and then it was like, well, let's go to this Caterpillar place, and went to work for a dealership in Caterpillar and spent 4 years in the same spot. And I was like, okay, I need to go do something different, right? Um, that's like essentially the last 10 years after getting out of the military before joining and just starting to do consulting work based on the things I've learned. I could look back at some of those events and say, oh, I failed at being a supervisor because I didn't keep it up, or I failed at, this, or I failed at the other thing. But to me, it was like, oh, I learned about me. I learned about my skills, my strengths, my weaknesses. I learned to play to my strengths and not worry about the things that I'm not great at. And in Keep On Leading, there's a whole chapter called Tom Brady Can't Block, which is about stop worrying about people's weaknesses, focus on their strengths, right? Imagine if you spent time and money trying to get Tom Brady to work on his weaknesses, like managers often want people to do. Like, why? Why would you take, now you're talking about possibly one of the greatest players of all time, and he's really terrible at this one thing. So we just don't have him do that one thing, right? Like, we just have him do the things he's really great at. And so I try to like internalize that same outlook about myself and say, what am I really good at? And I want to focus on doing those things that I'm good at, and not worry so much about this, binary success versus failure model. So that is like the longest non-answer that I could possibly give you.
It actually brings up a great point, and an additional question. So, do you think that I mean, is that part of your DNA by the way you were brought up, or do you think you learned that tool set through the military, through maybe ranger training or something like that?
Ooh, I don't know. Huh. That's interesting. I have never I don't know where or when that came up. I don't know. I was an only child, so that might have something to do with it. My parents always say how awesome I was, so that might have an effect. uh, Ranger School certainly does that to you too, because um, you fail your way through that course basically. Just suck all the way through it.
Warrant Officer School was the same for me. I mean, it's not as tough as Ranger School by any means. But yeah, I feel like it's a trait that you have to actively try to learn it. I don't think it comes natural to a lot of people. And I guess it depends on your environment that you were raised in. And of course, like positive reinforcement and the nurture and the nature. But
I'm not sure where I learned this, but it's certainly, I tell this to my kids anytime I hear them say anything negative about themselves. I tell it to my students. I teach a class at the university. I tell it to my coworkers. Whenever I hear someone do this, whenever I hear someone talk poorly about themselves or degrade themselves in any way, I mention to them that you need to guard the thoughts you have about yourself and the things you say about yourself, because you are listening to yourself, right? And so you speak those things into reality. Oh, I'm really not good at computers, right? Okay, you're not gonna be. With that attitude, you are 100% never gonna be good at computers, right? Like, I'm trying to teach you something. Oh, I'm just not good at Excel, right? Like, you're making that a reality because you're saying that, right? This isn't, I'm not smarter than you and I know how to do it, right? So let's figure this out together. But don't talk, have that positive thought about yourself. Um, uh, Especially if you're a man, because we do not receive compliments.
no.
People do not tell you good things about you.
And when we do, we don't know how to take those compliments. We freeze. We're like deer in headlights when somebody gives us a compliment. It comes so far out of left field. You're just like, what the?
So everyone else is going to tell you what a piece of shit you are. You don't need to tell yourself that too. You need to be telling yourself the opposite. So you can train your mind to do that. And then your behaviors and your actions and your performance will reflect that inner conversation that you have about yourself. So be very guarded about what you say about yourself in your head or out loud.
No, yeah, I totally agree. It's one of the, I feel like that's one of those tipping points in anybody's life, that once they get past that degrading self-talk, and not to go delusional to the complete opposite side of the spectrum.
Yeah. Don't become a narcissist. Sometimes you may need a little bit.
So good at sharpening pencils. Okay. How about one of the most impactful moments post-military, and what did you possibly learn from it? It could be time in the military as well, but one of those moments where you really just had this profound, like, wow, this is something really interesting. Because I think, I assume, but I think you would be the kind of person that would process things like that. Like when you've come across a profound, like with your children, when your child was born, you're like, hey, this is it. I want to spend time with my child. I don't want him to be growing up without seeing his father for 6 years, 7 years at a time. So,
well, that was the example I was going to give. So you stole that one from me. So I think there's been a few moments working in business. So I had an opportunity to work for a Fortune 100. I've worked for medium-sized business. I've helped small business and kind of seen a lot of things in different ways. There's been understanding of how these organizations make money. That was something that I genuinely did not. I thought I understood it, but I understood it in a theoretical framework, in the reality, right? And being exposed to the effects of kind of lean manufacturing and different processes and schools of thought and approaches and just how intricate things are. You know, I worked in a factory where we brought in bare steel on one end and we shipped out machines on the other, right? And getting to see that steel go from flat to bend, you know, or flat to cut, cut to bend, bend to weld, weld to assemble, assemble to paint, paint to pack out to shipping, right? Like this whole like process of how we create goods and services, and then understanding the marketing piece and what drives our decisions, and how do we get people, how do we convince people, and using emotion and logic at the same time to kind of drive people towards buying decisions. And just today in class, we had a discussion. One of the students was talking about student discounts, and we had a discussion about why did companies do that? And their framework was, well, we don't have a lot of money. And you know, their thought process was around, you know, looking internally and saying, these are my buying reasons, so that must be their selling reasons. And I finally told them and said, every reason you've given is a reason to help you. And I'm just going to tell you, the companies don't want to help you. They want to make money. So under that framework, what do you think is the reason why they would offer student discounts? And one of them finally clicked and he said, well, you told us once before that the easiest people to sell to are people that have already bought from you. And I said, exactly. And you're in your early 20s. Every one of you here is under 23 years old. So if I get you to buy my product at 22, I've got a customer for 40 years.
Yep.
Right. And so that sort of thinking about the economy and how things work and the true cost of labor and doing estimates of, you know, how much it's going to cost me to develop this new product and to staff it and run it and all of these things. It actually ignited a new passion for me. Right. And it gave me this new place of saying, this is really cool, to solve these very difficult problems of bringing something to market. And now, you know, post pandemic world where our supply chain has been massively disrupted, and it probably has a backlog that will exist for 1 to 2 more years before we've cleared it. Right. Like, and watching how do we adjust to this, right? So I don't know that it's been one moment, but maybe a series of things that have really ignited this love for me for the marketplace, and what happens in the market. And maybe in a lot of ways, the same way that I studied warfare, now I'm studying, you know, producing goods, and finding a similar passion inside of that.
Yeah. I mean, studying an economy, really, if you step back from it, you're basically studying the economy from A to Z. It's fascinating. Yeah. It's stuff that they don't teach you in school, really, not in regular school anyway, maybe at college. But even then you have a professor who is either knows it from experience or knows it from reading a book, right?
Right.
Experience always wins.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep. That's awesome. I might actually see if I can sign up for that class. Or at least sit in. I'm going to do a Steve Jobs and just sit in the class and I'm actually enroll. Did you ever get a chance to travel Space A while you were on active duty?
No, but I did travel Space A when I was a kid.
Oh, really?
So my dad was in the Navy. He's a retired naval officer. And we lived in Rota and Naples, and we traveled Space A back to the U.S. whenever we could.
Back to Jacksonville, huh?
What's that?
Was it still the rotator between Jacksonville and Naples?
And Rota? Yeah. And it was terrible.
I've been on it a couple of times. Yeah.
I think I was a young kid, but I think we took a flight. It was like a hopper or whatever from Naples to Rota. And it was like, I think it was a C-130. I don't know. It was, you know, the strap seats. Again, I was 12, 13 years old. So I don't remember it exactly, you know, I just remember being like, this is not a commercial aircraft.
So your experience was it sucked?
Yeah.
And then you joined the military years later and got to spend more time on the C-130 jumping out of them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, many more takeoffs than landings. In my, we actually had a kid that when we were going to Afghanistan, was really nervous in the plane, and everyone's like, "What are you nervous about?" He's like, "I've never landed in a plane before." he had he had taken like 12 flights, and he had never landed in a plane.
That's amazing.
So yeah, that was his first landing. Was in Shannon, Ireland.
Wow. Oh, that's that's the perfect place to get your first landing. I'm sure that was
Right.
wow. Okay. How do you feel about mentors in business? Do you think they're important? Have you had any past mentors or present mentors who really made an impact on your life, good or bad?
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody told me this way young age, and I don't remember who it was, 18 or 19. I took it to heart and started doing it immediately. And all through my life, um, what I have found is that maybe very few people meet are holistically someone that I would look up to. However, there is something that they're really good at that I can learn from. And that is how, I will focus my conversations with them on that thing, right? So whatever it may be, um, guys that are, if they're doing a job that I want to do, or they've had a job that I want to have. Hey, how did you get into this job? What can I do? How do I make myself stand out for this position? What are some tasks that I could take on now? What is the best path? Do you know anybody that can introduce me in this world? Um, and absolutely, absolutely have had it. Continue to pursue it, even in now in my consulting world. I'm looking at guys that are making almost absurd levels of money, uh, uh, doing this exact same work, and whenever I get the chance, right, it's hey, let's go have lunch, you and me, right? It just, or walking in the hallway, and I'll ask a question about, how did you get into this? What are you looking for? How do you find clients? How do you, that kind of stuff. And they just come to expect it after a while, and people like that. People like to give advice. We don't like to get it so much, but they love to give it. And they're happy to make introductions. And it's funny, I recently made an, so when I got into consulting, I talked to a guy who I knew was in it, that we knew each other from before. Um, and I've now made a referral for him to get a job consulting with me on this other company. Right. So it's like, it's come full circle where, in the beginning it was like, hey man, how do I get a job? He's like, here's where you can go. And then I got it. And then they're like, hey, do you know anybody that can do this kind of work? And I'm like, actually, yeah, I do, so absolutely recommended. Can't recommend it enough. It is certainly something that everyone should try and pursue and do in their life.
Yeah, I hate that it's looked at it's like such a woo woo thing, and a lot of if you watch a lot of stuff on YouTube or check out some of these online coaches, the 23-year-old life coaches. I mean, they say it, and it is important. I think it's important, and that's why I asked. But I like your approach. It's how I approach books. Like if I open a book, I'm not looking to get like, is this going to be the best book ever? But I'm looking to find one or two golden nuggets in that book. And if it happens to be more, then that's just added bonus. Right.
Right.
And then that in that process of repeating that over and over, you start to find better books along the way, or better mentors in this case. So that's great. If you could go back in time, if you had a time machine and you could have a short, let's say 20, 30-minute meeting with your 16-year-old self, what would that conversation look like, and where exactly would that conversation take place? Time, place?
Well, when I was 16, I was in Naples, Italy. And it would, what's that?
A great place, by the way.
It is a hard place to live. um, uh, the one thing I can think of is like, I want to give myself investment advice, right? Like that's That probably stems from the fact that I've, there's 5 people in my family that I have to feed, and we come with costs to do anything. So probably making money's on the top of my mind right now in life. And also, continue to value relationships, and pursue that, and set that as your, but I don't know. The thing about that question oftentimes is that it stems around like, what are the things you wish you could change? And I don't really want to change anything, because if I did, then I wouldn't be where I am today. Right? I wouldn't have the things that I have today, and that's not a sacrifice I'd want to make. Right? Like, I don't know that I'd want to live a life without my 3 babies. So whatever. I made some mistakes, but if I tell that kid not to make those mistakes, then I don't end up where I am.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I mean, the reason why I asked that question, and specifically 16 years old, it's like that time frame where you're you're on the cusp of becoming an adult. You're coming out of the childhood stage, and you're so very malleable, almost as malleable, I would say, as the time when you're like 0 to 2 years old, right? You're taking in all this information, and you're thinking actively about the future, about being an adult, going to college, having a job, having a wife and kids. Like, those kind of thoughts start to enter your mind around that age, 16, 17. So it's a really transitional age. And sometimes you can get really bad information at that age, which will then steer you down some stupid path and put you through a lot of pain and suffering, right? Or you could get good advice from a good coach or a mentor or a teacher, or somebody that could really change your life and set it off in a direction that you never thought was possible.
Yeah. Yeah. So I probably wouldn't be a good mentor to a 16-year-old then. Have integrity in everything you do. Absolutely. And I actually got that lesson as a kid. So, kind of a neat story. And that, I think it's in both books. I lied to my dad one time, and I was younger than 16. I think I was like 11 or 12. And he knew I was lying, and I didn't think he had figured it out. And he grounded me for like the whole summer, and came in after as he was telling me that. And he tells me, "Hey, what is the most valuable thing you own?" And I kind of looked around the room, and he's like, "Son, it's not in your room." And he goes, "It's your principles." And I kind of, and he goes, "Look, men can take your property. They can take your freedom. They can take your family. They can even take your life. But the one thing that only belongs to you, and it's only up to you to give away, are your principles. No one can ever steal that from you. So don't ever give them away." And that was his response to me lying to him. So that one stuck with me. And it was a valuable lesson, and certainly one that I'm going to try to impart on my own children. It's a good guide, good barometer to be on that side.
Pardon me for asking, and please, I apologize if it's intrusive, but is your father still around? Is he still alive?
He is.
Wow.
Yep. He is. He might be a good one to talk to. He is currently, he's at Fort Hood. He's the director of, he's a psychologist. And so he's a psychologist at Fort Hood, the director of something there. I don't know exactly what. But he just arrived. Now. What's that?
I said that makes total sense now, what he told you back then.
Yeah. Well, a Cuban refugee and a psychologist, so it kind of put those two together.
Yeah, it's a very, very stoic way of responding. He reached about 2,000 years back and pulled it out at the right moment. It's awesome.
We went to Thermopylae, by the way, and walked that battlefield, which is very different today than it was when they fought the Persians there.
Yeah.
But that was a staple in our home. The Athenian and the Spartan warrior trope. Uh, we had lots of memorabilia and visited that area often. So
That's
yeah,
awesome.
it makes sense that you would make that association.
So on that same note, and actually just leveraging the story about your father, who's been one of the most impactful people in your life up to this point?
Well, my teenage years was definitely my dad. Um, but then later it's probably been my wife, um, and helping me discover things about myself that maybe I didn't want to. Sometimes you just need an outsider to tell you. You know, there have been points in this journey of self employment where we were kind of struggling financially, and I was ready to just go and get another 9 to 5. And so here we are scraping, and she tells me, "Don't do that." Right? Like, you were absolutely miserable through that, and at least now you're happy. So, we will figure it out financially, whatever. But don't go back to that grind. Right? That's not who you are. You like the you like things to be different. You like the unexpected. You need to go into a company and work for 3 months and then leave, right? And go do it again somewhere else. Um, and she's been absolutely right. Like, and what's funny is that it was like a month after that conversation, I got, probably the largest contract I've ever gotten. And I'm making more money than I ever have in my life. Um, Doing that very work, for 6 months with a company that had a really difficult problem that they needed solved. Um, and in a few months, we're going to be done there, and we'll have to find another one. So,
That's incredible. It's really incredible. Thank her from me for all she's done for you, because maybe we wouldn't have ever crossed paths if that didn't happen. So I totally appreciate it. That's what it's all about. Just being supportive. Like, if nothing else, like, that's the baseline that you should be doing as a human being. That's great. That's really great. Okay, let's shift a little bit slightly. Um, if you were to give a short commencement speech to a room full of transitioning military members, usually it's college kids, but we're going to do military members because that's what we're all about. And assuming you only have 20 minutes to talk, what would you say to them? What would the topic or the thesis be for that talk?
I think a lot of that would do with some of the conversation we've already had, right? About um, letting them know about the challenges they're going to face, and that it's going to be hard, and that it's going to be lonely, and that you're giving up and you're leaving um, more than just a job. And one, that's preparatory warning that this is what you're going into. But then reminding them of everything they've come through. You're capable of taking on this challenge and doing well, and succeeding in whatever it may be. You have the capacity for what's coming. You can do this, right? And then finally, the last would be a little bit pragmatic, like, don't make stupid financial decisions right now. that's probably the last piece of, don't buy anything super expensive. If half of the people in this room are going to get a job and leave it in the first year, so just be prepared for that. And you think you know what you want to do, and you think you know what you are going to be happy with, location wise, and all of this stuff. You don't know. So don't tie yourself to the point where you can't pick up and move or change things. Be careful what you shackle yourself to. in the next 3 to 5 years.
It's great advice. How important do you think college education has been to your success? And would you recommend someone pursuing a college degree who is getting out of active duty that doesn't have a degree? Would it just pertain to specific areas of business or fields in the job force?
It's been very important, and I admit that begrudgingly. I wish it wasn't, because the utility of what I learned in the classroom versus what I've learned experientially, the experiential learning is infinitely more valuable than anything that I picked up in a classroom. So if someone were, I don't think that those degrees are the reason for any of my acquired knowledge, experiences, and skills. I don't think I acquired any of that through my college education. So as far as a value to me as an individual in growth, individual growth, very, very little. Very little. Unfortunately, those are gates by which we are measured in the civilian world, and the expectations are that you will have these qualifications in order to be able to do the job. So the MBA and the bachelor's degree get me in the room. They're just like had to do's, right? But not necessarily the way you phrase your question. I feel like I have to how instrumental were they? Well, it made me more competitive, and it got me in the room, and it let me interview for positions. I didn't have any major life-changing takeaways and learnings and things that I picked up during those experiences, getting those degrees, that I turned around and used on a daily basis. There might be some. Let me give it a little bit more credit. Some of the history stuff I may have picked up, and maybe a little bit of financial accounting and things like that, which kind of these sort of high level principles. But would I recommend it? If you are interested in a long-term career in the corporate world of leadership, yeah, you kind of need to do it. And it sucks, and it's dumb, and it shouldn't be a requirement, because you know more without having had, like, you're not going to learn anything new getting a degree, but it's just one of those requirements that you have to do and you have to have. So sorry. Yeah, I recommend you get one if that's what you want to do. If you want to work in trades, if you don't want to be in leadership, or then no, right? There's no real value in that.
Yeah, thank you for your candidness on that. That's it's a question that I see tossed back and forth a lot. It's a question that I struggle with myself a lot, and I like that answer. You kind of have to set up your own pedigree to be able to go into some of those careers, but it's business management or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a tough cookie to crack for sure. And there's a ton of people that may or may not have used their their GI Bill or post 9/11 or whatever it is now. So, and the investment of time, that's the other piece of it.
Yeah.
So something that I think about a lot, and I think about when I'm talking to people about military and being in the military, retiring, all those different things. If you could make one post on LinkedIn that for sure would be reaching millions of people, let's just call it 5 million people across the globe, and you only had 2 to 3 sentences to do that post, what would that post say? Almost like a digital billboard.
I don't know. I saw this. You sent me this beforehand, and I was like, man, I don't know. There's this battle that goes on in my brain of like, you could use it for good, right? For societal good. of teaching and imparting some sort of wisdom. That's one way. uh, but 5 million people, like, that's an opportunity to make some money, right? So, like,
Hey, they could totally be that way. Again, there's no right or wrong answers.
right?
People would say, "Hey, this is what I would put in the post. Don't be an asshole."
Yeah, that's pretty good. Don't be an asshole. I like that one. I actually, one of my mechanics had that in his toolbox. He had a little thing that said "Don't be a dick." Actually, is what it said on his thing, and and I was like, you know what? That is a great basis for leadership, right? You want to lead people, don't be an asshole. It's very simple. That's good. I would also probably tell him to buy my book so that I could make some money off this post.
Please. Jab, jab, jab. So, along the same lines of business leadership, business management, and getting yourself into the business world, what are your thoughts on personal brand and how important do you feel it is being successful in the next decade coming up?
Yeah. I will tell you that okay, so you're going to go, when you apply to a job, you're going to put your thing in the ATS, or some sort of systems. There's going to be some sort of digital filtration system. And then there's going to be a list of candidates. Um, so the next thing I do as a hiring manager is I look them up. And that's pretty much what everybody's going to do. They're going to, I'll read the resume. Actually, I'll read the resume. And then if I think, okay, this person could move forward, I'll look them up. So you'll get people looking at your LinkedIn profile or whatever it is, to make an assessment about, excuse me. The other thing is, I've got a pretty strong LinkedIn presence. I oftentimes get offers for positions, without unsolicited, people saying, "Hey, we've got this opportunity." Blah blah blah. 98% of the time, they're kind of junky. I'm not really interested. Also, I'm not really interested in 9 to 5. So there's that piece. But a strong enough personal brand where people start associating you with a particular thing, that is extremely valuable, right? If you think about Joe Rogan, you have an opinion about that person. He is making $150 million because he's been successful at establishing a personal brand. Elon Musk, um, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, uh, you know, um, what's that guy from the Daily Show? Trevor Noah, right? Like, all of these people that we know as celebrities, um, for one way or another, they have a personal brand associated, and simply thinking about that individual generates a feeling about them, right? And feelings are what we make decisions based off of, not facts. As much as you've heard the facts don't care about your feelings thing, human beings, this is a marketing thing, I'll tell you, emotion drives decisions, not facts, which is why when you're trying to debate somebody and you may drop a fact on them that runs counter to what their beliefs are, you will notice that they don't change their beliefs based on the facts, because our beliefs aren't driven by fact. They're driven by how we feel, what we want to feel. So how important is your personal brand? I would say it's very important. Um, don't have a DA photo as your LinkedIn profile. Uh, I'm not going to hire that guy because his personality is way too tied with his military. He needs to loosen up a little bit more, kind of get out of that a little bit. And if I call you and you say Roger on the phone during the thing, like, it's not a thing that I'm not gonna disqualify you over it, but it is gonna raise some concerns and stuff. So, um, the military shouldn't be your personality. It's certainly things, every day I use analogies of things that, I'm creating a talk in one of my clients' offices, right? Like, yeah, we steal these ideas, we use these ideas, and we relate to people with our experiences in the military. But if we, can't go to work without commenting about someone not having a straight gig line, right? Like, you gotta pull off of that. Anyway, personal brand, very important.
If you could name 1, 2, 3 books that have influenced your choices or your decisions over the years, greatly impacted your life, what would some of those be?
Yeah. Okay. So the Bible, and it again, this is another one that feels a little bit what is the word I'm looking for? Anyway, cheesy, I guess. You know, like a canned answer type thing that you sort of have to. But I really do. You know, I try and read it almost every day, and pick up lessons and behaviors and things that I should. What are the expectations of me? Um, so that is certainly one of them. Um, Beyond that, um, it's hard to pick like another two. I have many books on the bookshelf, and it stems from like what my my particular interests are of the day. You know, am I trying to learn about business? Am I trying to learn about selling? Am I trying to learn about branding, marketing, social media usage, or whatever? And taking these little bits and pieces from each one. Um, I think Jocko Willick's Extreme Ownership was also really good. Um, and but what's interesting about it is that what it also did was it motivated me to write my own leadership book. Right, so I used it as a tool to train other leaders, and then realized that there were some things that were lacking in this particular book that I could use, or that I could change in my own story to do that. And it's funny that I hear a lot of people when they pick up Keep On Leading, they'll send me a message and be like, in the beginning, it felt a lot like Extreme Ownership. And it's like, well, that it sort of was the motivation for writing the book. So begrudgingly, I guess in this case, I have to give Jocko credit for making me want to write a book through his own writings. I don't know. I can't think of a third one right now. I'm drawing a blank.
Let me pivot real quick. In your reading of the Bible, and probably your whole life, I would imagine, what are a couple verses that really give you that kind of North Star, that guiding principle?
Yeah. Well, so one that's interesting for me is 1 Peter 3:15, which is so I haven't my whole life been a biblical guy. So I kind of grew up very much in an atheist, a soft atheist household. We didn't go to church. We didn't really talk a lot about God. And I kind of reached the conclusion about faith on my own through what's called apologetics. And 1 Peter 3:15 is the verse says, always be prepared to give a defense for what you believe, for the hope that is within you, and do so with gentleness and kindness and respect, or something along those lines. So it's an apologetic. The word that Peter uses for defense is apologia, which means to defend. And apologetics for me is really how I have grown in my faith. For a lot of people, that's not the case. That, it's experiential. It's, they faith through feeling kind of thing. For me, it's been the evidence that has driven me towards leaning in closer to God. And so, that is the evidentiary verse on that. And then you've got 1 Corinthians 15, which is the Paul, he recites the sort of the creed, the early creed. So I give to you what's given to me. And it's kind of like the Christian faith in a few lines, where Paul is giving us like, this is the deal. This is how this goes down. Isaiah 53, it's another apologetic piece, written a few thousand years before Christ, which I think is kind of cool. Everyone says John 3:16. You've heard that one before. The book of James, almost in its entirety, is like the whole thing is almost highlighted in my Bible. Matthew 28, another one, which is go and make disciples. I don't know. There's a few others.
That's great. Yeah, no, I'm gonna have to go and read it. I read it from time to time. I'm not a religious person, really.
Yeah.
I grew up kind of on my own, figuring out religion.
Yeah.
But I do read it from time to time. So I'll definitely look those up and also post them in the notes. That's really good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite? Well, let me ask this first. Do you have a pet?
I do have a pet.
Okay.
Yeah. For the first time. It's a dog.
A dog. What kind of dog?
He's a Labradoodle and a hound. He's a mutt. So it was a little bit of I don't know that you could call it a rescue so much as the parents didn't plan on this litter. And so he was from how do we get rid of this litter type thing? And my wife fell in love, and it was COVID, and we were all at home. And I said, well, I've always been against getting a dog because of how much we like to travel, but we're not going anywhere for a while, so this would be a good opportunity.
Nice. And yeah, so along that same lines, do you have a favorite animal? And if so, like what's the specific character, the feature that draws you to that animal?
No, I don't know that I have anyone in particular. I mean, obviously I like my dog, and he's my favorite boy, my buddy. But beyond that, I don't know that I marvel at nature. Mm-hmm. I don't know that there's ever been a single particular creature that just really catches my, that I feel mesmerized by, mm-hmm.
No, that's good though. I like the answer to it about marveling at nature. I think that's actually also important. It's kind of the reason why I put that question in there. It seems a little bit out of left field, but it kind of gets really specific because marveling at nature is a little bit broader. So dig down, but no, that's actually a really good point and very, very in context of that question. So it's perfect. If you had the opportunity and the means to invest $10 million in something you're passionate about that many, many people that know you wouldn't know about you, what would this be and why? It could be a charity, it could be an orchestra, a kids club, anything.
Yeah. See, the problem is that I would take that 10 million and I would invest it in like 10 different things.
That's fine. That's an answer too.
So, there's, I would certainly continue with my real estate investing. I do some multifamily investing on the side, mostly on the passive side. There's a lot of charities out there that I'd love to be able to give money to and help out. Some local, very, very local kind of Tucson specific ones. And in my networking that I do, you run into a lot of people. It's nice to just be able to help somebody out sometimes. Right. And I think that is also, now that we've injected the Bible into this conversation and biblically as a Christian, that is kind of something that we're expected to do. Right. A lot of people want to evangelize all over the world, and miss the evangelism opportunities next door. And we're expected to behave a certain way, and is through our living example, is our greatest testimony. Right. And so, yeah, I don't know. Probably the multifamily thing is the one that maybe folks don't know because I don't talk about it too much. Mm-hmm. We're about to sell an apartment complex now, and pretty excited about that. I've got a little fraction of the deal, but it's still pretty nice.
That's great. So that's a good answer. Okay, so I know we've gone for about an hour and some change. I want to definitely be respectful of your time, and so I'll start to wrap it up real quick. But are there any parting words, anything that we didn't cover that you maybe want to mention to the audience of all 12 people out there listening at the moment, but hopefully in the future, maybe more?
Yeah, no, man. I think if you, if you're interested in hearing more, or have some questions, or approaching these decisions, I'm on LinkedIn every day, pretty much. A little bit less now. I'm kind of deep in execution phase with my current client, so I haven't been posting nearly as much as I used to. But it's a good place to find me, and it's actually me. It's not some sort of bot, and I will get to you as soon as I have the opportunity. But I do try to respond to every non-sales email that I get. Okay. If that, I'm putting that caveat in there on purpose.
The ones that you get.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, my email's out there in the public, so, and I've always been kind of that way about it, but I know it's not always a good move, because then you just open yourself up to like full frontal attack.
Yeah. Well, I mean, into the LinkedIn messaging deal, right? Yeah. So like, inside of that network. Right. Yep.
It's all fun and dandy. Good. Yeah. That would be my other thing. If they want to learn more about you, that would be LinkedIn. Yeah. And any other links to the books, or any other links that you want to provide me afterwards, I can throw in the notes at the bottom. Look, Louis, thank you very much. I'm super, super, super humbled by your presence here today. I really appreciate the talk and the time. And thank you for helping to build this out. And hopefully this is going to be helpful to some people who are trying to make that transition from military to civilian and don't have things figured out, because there's not a ton of information out there. The transition process is really fast and furious, and you miss a lot of things along the way. So trying to pull out some of those really important points, and also the emotional and mental things that go on, and you speak to in your books a lot. So anybody that's watching or listening, I would definitely check those out, at least the first few chapters. I don't know how deep into the book you're going to get, and try not to send hate mail back if you see something that really triggers you, because it's really raw and honest, and I think it's 100% correct. I think those books couldn't be written any other way. So
yeah, well, thank you, Ben. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
and thanks for having me.
Yep, and be sure to stay tuned, and we'll have some more interviews coming up. And thanks a lot for being here today. It means a lot to me.
Thank you.
All right.